Hello and welcome to Teal Blue, your cybersecurity podcast focused on important cybersecurity news for Australian organisations. My name is Brad Morgan, and as always, today I'm joined by Richard Granger.
Hey, going, Brad?
Good, thank you, Rich. Look, long time no speak. It's been a while since we recorded one of these podcasts.
It's been a little while.
And look, apologies to our listeners between leave and just being very, very busy between DFIR and SOC. Richard and I have not had our calendars align, I'll put it that way. So we've put some processes in place to resolve that. We're going to be bringing in some guest hosts in the future to ensure that we're able to deliver this on a fortnightly basis moving forward. So looking forward to being able to get this out much more reliably in the future.
Definitely.
Excellent. So look, normally we focus on what's been happening for the last couple of weeks, and that's what we're going to do. We're not going to go back over everything since last time we spoke. So Rich, run us through what's on the agenda today.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of things to talk about today. We'll be talking about a man being charged in connection to a Sydney hospital business email compromise, which I think is going to be a very interesting one.
If you're going to extort someone, don't do it locally, right?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I have a feeling this might be related to a money mule, but we'll dig into that. We're also going to be talking about the disruption to RedLine and META infostealers and their infrastructure as well.
So well, that could be big if they've been successful there. That could be very, very good to see.
Definitely. This is an older one, but I think this would have come out in September, but I think it's very worthwhile discussing, and that's the ASD's guidance on detecting and mitigating Active Directory compromises.
I completely agree. It is something that every organisation should be doing. We just see so much related to AD, right? Anything you can do to raise that barrier of entry needs to be considered.
Yep, harden the environment.
Yeah.
The next one's an interesting one. It's to do with Bengal cat lovers being targeted in GootLoader campaign.
I mean, I have so many questions.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a good topic to talk about, I think.
Yep.
Then for Vulnerability of the Month, we've got CVE 2024-47575, which is affecting FortiGate, FortiManager, and FortiManager Cloud as well. Another FortiGate vulnerability.
Oh, yes, it's another FortiGate vulnerability, but can we just look at the fact that is CVE 2024 47,575?
Yeah. A lot of vulnerabilities.
People go, why is vulnerability management so hard? There's your reason. Over 47,000 vulnerabilities so far this year.
We've still got plenty of time left in the year as well.
Oh yeah.
Waiting for that Christmas special.
Log4j dropped 13th of December a few years ago, right? We are waiting for what's going to ruin all of our Christmases. But if you're doing vulnerability management properly, it shouldn't ruin your Christmas. It should just be part of your process.
Yep.
Anyway.
And then we'll be wrapping it up with what's been happening in the SOC and DFIR.
Yes, a lot. So, all right, well, let's jump into someone ransoming a Sydney hospital, not as in a ransomware attack, but a BEC. Sorry, I was wrong there. So, look, I mean, we see BECs all the time, right? So, this one, however, is a 49-year-old Sydney man has been charged in relation to an alleged business email compromise that defrauded a hospital in Burwood, Sydney of $2 million. So New South Wales Police operating under Strike Force, is that Melbourne?
Melbourne, yep.
Conducted the investigation, which led to his arrest. Look, I mean, how often do we see BECs that are payment fraud or payment redirects, sending false invoices, injecting themselves into payment chains and that sort of thing? Incredibly rare, as far as I'm aware, to be able to actually get this through to prosecution. because most of the time these are things that are not being done locally. And going from what you've said above, I think you've got some thoughts on how this one occurred.
Yeah, so the BEC itself led to $2 billion of financial loss. So obviously it's going to be a very keen thing that the New South Wales Police Cybercrime Score will be looking into. It's a fairly large amount. Although, with BECs, while we do see a lot of them that are low volume in terms of money, you can have, $1 million ones as well, as obviously evidenced here as well. And they don't go into too much detail about this man's involvement in the BEC, but I suspect probably what's happened here is, as you mentioned, a lot of the time they're looking to perform payment redirection fraud, so intercept an invoice, update payment details, and more than likely, I'm sort of guessing here at this stage because obviously it's still under investigation, but more than likely this ban might have been tied to the bank account that the money was transferred to, and perhaps the cybercrime squad were able to sort of track back to him, and maybe he's had previous involvement and they were able to in other scams like this as well, and was able to use that to bring forth these charges.
Look, I don't want to encourage BSEs and payment fraud, but I mean, if you're going to do it, you need some bloody good OPSEC. That, if I know we don't know necessarily that it was his name linked, but you want to make sure if you're going to be silly enough to try something like this, especially in the same jurisdiction, OPSEC's important, right? And it is hard to get right. I mean, we put a lot of effort into our OPSEC, even on the defensive side of things. And we've seen threat actors with poor OPSEC in the past. So, hopefully, as the police and organisations such as ourselves get better at investigating these things, we can start bringing more and more of these people to face the music for what they're doing.
Yep, 100%.
So, look, mate, let's talk about some preventative measures. And I guess the thing before that is the sophistication of what we're seeing in BEC scams. What are you guys seeing as part of DFIR around how sophisticated these are and some of the measures that organisations can take to protect themselves?
Yeah, so some of the time we just see most of the time it's going to be initial access will be through phishing. So the target's delivered a phishing email, which will take them to a credential harvester, and they'll enter their details on there. Sometimes, even now, we're near the end of 2024, we're still seeing cases where MFA is not on those accounts, and once the threat actor's got that username and password, that's all they need. They're able to log in to the account.
In all honesty, I know they're forcing it for admins. How long before Microsoft and Google and that start forcing MFA for end users?
It can't come soon enough.
I know, right? I don't think it's even in conversation. But in all honesty, there needs to be something done to prevent this. But I mean, session token theft or session token hijacking is that common these days. That
yes, 100%. That's so we see that all the time. And a lot of the conversation during the initial triage calls for BECs is around we had MFA, how was this possible? And that's when we start to educate people about session token theft and how it works and how it's able to bypass MFA. So that's obviously MFA is a no-brainer, but it can be bypassed. That's when you need to look at implementing other things within your M365 tenancy to prevent this from happening, whether that's changing the session token life cycle, monitoring of the environment, putting in some conditional access policies around where threat actors are at or where anyone can authenticate from. Obviously try and exclude countries where the threat actors originating from, but there are things you can do out there to protect the environments from these kind of things.
There are. I mean, enrolled devices is a big one, right? Like ensuring that your users are only authenticating to your environment from your own devices that you manage is a huge one. We were hopeful that Google's update of Chrome to actually pin session tokens to the browser would reduce a lot of this, and I did read something recently that it has been to an extent bypassed. And I don't want to talk too much around that because I haven't read enough into it to speak with any level of authority. But I think we're still a ways off before any form of session token pinning is an acceptable control at this point. So ensuring that your users are on devices you own, you manage, and you control, and a threat actor would have to physically be on that asset is probably the best way about it at this point in time.
Yeah, and that's sort of just touching on the the technology side of things that can be done, but also there are education for employees about what the risks are and what to look for in these kinds of scams, but also things that aren't technology based at all, like doing multi-step verification of invoice changes, like picking up the phone. We've had a lot of business email compromises where the threat actor was in, that's been confirmed, and they tried to do payment redirection fraud, but it was actually stopped by someone going, yeah, it's a little bit strange, let's pick up the phone, let's give them a ring and validate it, and that saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's it. It comes back to the old safety, right? If you're in accounts payable and you see someone, or you're in finance and you see a request to update the payment details for anyone that you deal with, pick up the phone, give them a call, and don't use the contact details within the email. Use the contact details within your CRM or from the internet, that from their own website, to be able to ring these people and make sure that you are actually making changes where they've confirmed, because you don't know, you might not be compromised, but they may be, right? Yeah. And if they've been compromised, you've paid that money, and that means the organisation you're dealing with is out of pocket unless they can get the money back. So there are things there that can be done, and taking those administrative steps are absolutely critical in being able to protect yourself against this.
Yep, absolutely.
This one I'm really excited about. The amount of alerts we see for RedLine stealer out in the world.
Yes.
Let's talk about RedLine and META. Infostealers have been disrupted by a operation between a number of international law enforcement agencies. So this one, including the AFP, have disrupted the operations of two widespread infostealers, being RedLine and META. So they're responsible for stealing millions of credentials and financial information. I mean, these things are nasty, right? The amount of data we see stolen from these things, it is amazing. Never save credentials to your browser. That is, if you've got family, if you've got kids, even if you do it yourself, please don't save creds or anything to your browser. If you get one of these things on your machine, you're done. Sorry, back on track. So Operation Magnus led to the seizure of two command and control domains associated with malware, and an alleged developer of RedLine faces charges. So these malware strains are sold as malware as a service, or MAAS, and allowing affiliates to purchase licenses and launch attacks. So, I mean, affiliate services. Everyone's used to affiliate services with ransomware. I'm sure it's widely known. Most people have heard us also speak about phishing as a service. Malware as a service is something I don't think we've touched on. But I mean, if I was wearing a threat actor cape, right, I would be looking at going, okay, I'm going to go for a phishing as a service platform, and I'm going to then try and get a malware as a service type thing with RedLine running in conjunction with that. It's just so easy. The return on investment is absolutely huge. So I'm keen to hear your take on the key points of this one, mate.
Yeah, so I think it's a good thing, obviously. Like both RedLine and META are, some of the very well known info stealer malwares. We've had a couple of ransomware engagements that the initial access has been tracked all the way back down to a compromise on a host with RedLine Stealer, which is, as you mentioned, exfiltrated credentials have been saved in browsers. So that's why, yes, as Brad said, don't save any creds in browsers. Use a password manager for that kind of thing.
And if you're, sorry, Matt, I was just going to say, if you're an organisation who is implementing or has implemented a password manager, ensure that you've wiped credentials from your users' browsers as well.
Yeah,
because that is something
definitely.
that most organisations end up overlooking, and they forget that that's been done, hasn't been done. So just a little tidbit, pick that one up.
Yep, definitely. And that, I mean, it's led directly to a ransomware attack. So obviously, it can be very, very nasty in terms of what the end outcome is for organisations. And we typically see, RedLine and META and other infostealers being bundled into like cracked software and things like that, and also second stage payloads for other things like GootLoader, which we'll be touching on a little bit later on. So I think it's really good that the law enforcement's been able to do this, take down the command and control domains. One thing to note though is there is apparently some already cracked versions of RedLine floating about, so you're able to utilize that code as a threat actor without being tied to those command and control domains that have been seized, or the developer. You're still able to use that software and continue to do what you're doing. So there's not much to be done about that. That ship's already sailed, but it's a good step being able to achieve this.
Yep. Look, it is whack-a-mole. Once we see it, we'll start identifying these domains, and the cybersecurity community as a whole, obviously, will start picking these things up and working to wipe them out. But it is tough. But any action is better than inaction. So,
yep, agreed.
Awesome. Look, yeah, I mean, I think I've covered off a lot of the talking points at the top. My apologies for that one, but I guess the one thing that we've got here in the show notes, and I'd love your take on, is the psychological impact on the threat actors. So we are seeing disruption around ransomware groups. We're seeing some disruption around phishing groups, and now malware as a stealer. What do you think the impact of this might be on some of the threat actors out there?
It's a good question. I think particularly if you're a ransomware group and you're an affiliate, I think there's potentially a lack of trust in some of the groups at the moment. Am I safe if I work for Lockbit, for example? They've obviously had a lot of headlines over the last few months. The leader being named and being sanctioned as well. So even if you wanted to make a payment to Lockbit, your organization's in such a position that's like the only option to be able to resume business is you're probably not going to be able to. Maybe you can try and get an exemption from the Australian government to bypass the sanction, but from the lawyers I've spoken to, it's going to be pretty hard thing to do. So I think, it's definitely going to potentially make these affiliates jump ship, move to other ransomware as a service groups, utilize different tools and things like that. I think you mentioned before it's going to be whack-a-mole, though. It's just going to be, jumping from one thing to the next.
Look, we saw it with Lockbit, right? I can go back through our stats, so I don't have them on me, but we did see with Lockbit that when they went down initially, we saw other threat actors become more prevalent. So there's definitely that. I think on the other side of things, I think about a lot of young kids that are maybe on the wrong path and just getting into this. And if we're making it harder for them to get access to these affiliate services and making it harder for them to sit there in their bedroom at 16, 17 years old or whatever, just bored teenagers thinking, oh, this doesn't hurt, making it harder for them to go and buy phishing services and buy malware as a service type things, I think that's a great thing. Because it is then going to hopefully deter these kids and result in less threat actors in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe that's I'm being overly positive about it, but I'm hopeful.
Nothing wrong with being hopeful.
That's it. If we can impact it early, hopefully there'll be some improvement in the future out of that one. ASD, they have been releasing some absolutely brilliant things recently, and another one here. So this is the ACSC. For those that are unaware, that is the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and they are run by the Australia Signals Directorate. So they've released a comprehensive guidance on detecting and mitigating compromises in Microsoft Active Directory. This initiative, developed in collaboration with international partners, addresses 17 prevalent techniques used by malicious actors to exploit AD vulnerabilities. Look, it's never going to go away. Yes, organizations are going cloud and all that sort of thing, but most organizations I've seen go cloud have still got some form of on-prem AD.
Yeah, so, it's very rare we'll come across an organization that's cloud only.
Yeah. So, mate, I mean, this is your bread and butter, right? Compromised AD. I'm looking through the common attack techniques and I'm going, yeah, I reckon we've seen every one of those in the last 12 months within DFIR. Take the lead, mate. Walk us through it.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think this is really good that what they've done here. I think the more knowledge around this common attacks and techniques and things like that directors are using, and then providing organizations this information free of charge to raise awareness and let them know what they need to do to mitigate it is really, really good. And I'm glad, where the Australian government is putting this kind of stuff out there. And this one in particular, this is focused, as you mentioned, on Active Directory, basically the heart and brain of an organization's internal Windows network and how everything's able to authenticate. So some of the specific attack techniques that they're talking about is like Kerberoasting and password spraying, DC sync, gold ticket, pass the hash, all these sorts of things that we see fairly frequently in probably said most ransomware attacks is once the threat has got that initial access, that initial foothold into a network, whether that's through like getting onto the network via a VPN, or they've publicly facing exploit on some server and now they're starting to map out the internal network. These are things that we see all the time. So it very much is, this is real life stuff that is happening and impacting Australian organizations. It's definitely should be on people's radars to read this and figure out how do they have any of this implemented in their network at the moment, or what do they need to do to implement it?
Yeah, look, I completely agree. And if you don't understand any of those names that Richard's read out, or even if there's a couple there that you're unaware of, I highly recommend going and having a read of what the ASD have released, because these are common real-world attacks. And look, most of them, without a full domain compromise, I do see pen testers attempt, even when they're pen testing. So if you are running any type of security within your environment, including pen testing, then chances are you have seen this. And if you're not if you don't have detections and you're not able to detect some of these, especially a DC sync attack, password spraying, that is low level. That is pre-compromise for password spraying. DC sync attack, that's cloning your Active Directory. Most SIEM solutions won't detect it because what they're looking for is a command run on the box that is attempting to clone your DC. We've spent months working with one of our SIEM vendors to actually build a detection that will work on the domain controller. So, just keep that in mind that you might have tools out there, and unless you know for certain that they are going to be able to detect this, you may not be covered. So go have a read of what the ASD are recommending, and definitely take those steps to harden the environment.
Yeah, they've even got some Windows event IDs in there, and like the source of where it should come, or like just very verbose information here about like what do these events actually mean, and like why is it important to be at least logging it, making sure it's turned on, because some of the time this stuff's not turned on by default in Windows. It's just it's a great article.
It is.
Highly recommended. Everyone who works in IT, especially if you're working as an IT systems administrator and you're sort of responsible for maintaining an organization's network, it's worth being very well aware of this stuff because it is happening in the real life.
Again, we're on the one I've got questions about. So Sophos have released an article or issued a warning regarding a specific search query that cyber criminals are exploiting to compromise personal information. Individuals searching for are Bengal cats legal in Australia are at risk of encountering malicious links that appear legitimate but lead to data theft. So look, this sounds like search query optimization poisoning, but
Yes.
I have questions. That's what's just jumped into my head. To be honest, I haven't read this article yet. I haven't had time. Walk us through it.
Yeah, so Sophos have put through this is only a couple of days old as well, a bit of a advisory, basically talking about how, as you mentioned, the SEO poisoning for that particular term, are Bengal cats legal in Australia? I'm trying to say that without laughing. And essentially what it would do is very high up in the search results would be a link to download a file, which would be something called GootLoader. And GootLoader is something that we've actually seen fairly frequently as sort of a really effective initial foothold on a machine. So someone's going to download this zip file or whatever it is that they've clicked on this link for, and then run it. And that's when GootLoader is going to execute, steal some information about the system, and also act as a way remote access Trojan. So you're able to come back and install further tools, Cobalt Strike, whatever it is that you use to be able to get back on the machine. So it is a fairly common thing. This is the first time I've seen it using that particular search phrase or anything even remotely related to that. We've seen it fairly targeted before to do with like lease agreements in New South Wales or Queensland, or some obscure legal template for something like that. So yeah, it's a very interesting technique.
You say some obscure legal template, but I mean, what's the percentage of the population wondering if Bengal cats are legal in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, the question here, Brad, is are they? I don't even know.
I don't want to search it.
Yeah, don't click on any links.
What is the percentage of the population for something that is actually? I mean, I haven't looked into SEO poisoning in a long time, but it costs. It's not free to be able to go and manipulate these searches, as far as I'm aware. And even if it is free, I imagine the time investment would be huge. So there must be a reason for this campaign to be occurring. It eludes me, but there must be a reason for it.
Yeah, it's there's a threat actor somewhere that thought, this is what we're gonna use.
It could be a university project, right? Who knows?
Yeah, there we go. It could be. This could all be some giant honeypot. This is someone's thesis that they're. I mean, they made the news, so it's successful.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm blown away by this one, but it is a reminder for people, right? Like this is a thing, and don't trust everything you read on the internet. 2, don't trust everything you can download from the internet. Even if something looks legitimate, question it. My mum recently ordered something for my son for his birthday from a website. She was complaining that it hadn't arrived 3 weeks later. And I had a look and I go, Mum, there is no way I would have spent money on this website. She goes, oh, just all through PayPal, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, yeah. I looked into it. It turned out to be legitimate, but tell you what, it looked
sus.
It's an Australian animation studio, so they don't have the biggest budget in the world, but it looked really dodgy, and I definitely wouldn't have done it. So, but there are people out there that will do it, and the older generation, a lot of them are the ones with more money in the bank and probably more susceptible to this sort of thing as well. So, yeah, definitely keep aware of that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Like clicking on stuff that and downloading stuff that you're not sure of. That's the number one thing there. We have actually seen GootLoader bypass AV in the past. I won't say who it was, but they didn't have the top tier EDR.
Well,
for it. They had that AV version.
Okay, so this is the flip side of that, right? I work in cybersecurity, so I've been very considered in what antivirus / EDR I've installed on all of my machines. I hope for my kids and my family. For those people out there who don't have CrowdStrike running at home on consumer grade equipment, yeah, these things can be bypassed very, very easily. Those antivirus tools that you can go and buy off the shelf at Officeworks or places like that, just keep in mind that these things are built to bypass EDR, and what you're running at home is not an EDR tool.
Yeah. So
I don't want to get myself in trouble there, but I don't think I'm saying anything that's incorrect. So
no, I mean that's specifically what these are actually doing is building these things in a way that it's a cat and mouse game to try and
literally
make stuff. Yeah, a Bengal cat and mouse game.
Sorry, I couldn't pass that.
Yeah, that's a great one. I like that. So it's just something you need to be aware of, and having things at the front of your mind about, like, do I click on and download and open this thing? That can be what saves you in the end.
Yep. I mean, should you have to download anything to know if Bengal cats are legal in Australia? Probably not.
Yeah, it's true.
Ask ChatGPT. I'm sure that'll give you a good answer.
I did Google it before. I didn't click on anything that it told me to download. But apparently, because they're a hybrid cat species, most hybrid cat breeds are not permitted into Australia.
There you go.
So there you go.
Yep. There you go. We've got enough predators in this country. We don't need more.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I think mate, I'm glad that was the story. Like, that's a brilliant laugh. I love it.
I liked it. Yeah.
And look, if there's any Bengal cat fans out there, write us in. I'd love to see pictures.
Absolutely.
I've seen one, so send them through. Vulnerability of the month. As I said at the top, 47,575 is the number for this one. So CVE 2024 47575. This is affecting FortiManager and FortiManager Cloud. So Fortinet have disclosed a critical vulnerability affecting FortiManager and FortiManager Cloud, which are central to managing Fortinet devices. Vulnerability allows unauthenticated attackers to register unauthorized devices, potentially leading to unauthorized access and data exfiltration. I mean, that just sounds all kinds of bad. Again, Rich, take it away.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, you can basically use this to do bad things. Unauthorized access to a FortiManager is not something that any organization would want. So there's pretty widespread in terms of versioning impacted by this, like 7.0, 7.2. I won't go through them all, but there's a large,
all the way up to 7.4.3. Oh, that's cloud. Sorry.
Yeah. So they're all impacted. The mitigation that's been recommended by Forti is to upgrade, obviously, to specific versions that are no longer impacted. It's good. And also implementing some configuration changes which will prevent unauthorized device registration as well. So there's a couple of things that can be done to mitigate this one.
So just riddle me this. If an organization prevented these devices from being exposed to the internet, that would be your number one mitigating control, yes?
Yes.
So why in 2024 are we still having to tell organizations not to expose these things to the internet?
Yeah, it's a hard one. Where we've had an investigation recently where it was not this vulnerability, but one of the many previous FortiGate vulnerabilities that was eventually led to that server being exploited by a threat actor, and then ransomware eventually throughout the environment as well. So it's hard, and I mean, in that particular situation, they thought that it was being patched by the MSP. The MSP, it wasn't in their remit to manage and look after that one. So I think it's probably really important when organizations are deploying this or having someone deploy it for them is them having an understanding about, all right, what's involved here, what servers are you standing up? Is this going to be like internet facing? If so, right, are you putting that in its own VLAN? Are you restricting what traffic can hit it, where that traffic originates from? What are you putting in place to mitigate some of the risks that are involved with having this internet facing?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, right? Using a managed service provider or an MSSP does not completely remove the risk exposure to an organization. Ultimately, the organization is still 100% accountable for protecting their own infrastructure and the data they hold. So, I mean, yeah, you need to have an understanding of what is in your environment and what's exposed. And look, I know, I'm making it sound oversimplistic saying don't expose these things to the internet, right? People, yes, they run VPNs and firewalls have to be on the internet. It's their job. But the management side of a firewall should never be exposed. And if it is, make it, so you can only access it from trusted IP addresses. That's if you absolutely have to expose them.
Yeah. And like, as you mentioned, VPNs, that's the whole point. They're on the internet, but who's reviewing the log? Like, who's reviewing the configuration for how that was set up? And who's reviewing the authentication attempts as well? Because I think we've discussed it before. A lot of the initial access vectors we're seeing for ransomware investigations is through either brute force password spraying on a VPN or stolen credentials, being able to access that VPN. And if someone was looking at the logs and going, why is someone trying 10,000 combinations a minute? Something might be, we might need to do something about that.
Exactly. And look, I'm going to be honest. Even commercial scenes out there with user entity behavior analytics are not great at detecting brute forcing on firewalls. They're not great at detecting brute forcing on VPNs. They're great at picking it up on Microsoft 365 and other cloud tooling. But yeah, they're not wonderful when it comes to this kind of infrastructure. So you need to make that consideration, and you do need to have some form of auditing in place. So yeah, huge. And look, I mean, we say 40, but it's any.
There's what I was contemplating choosing this or the Palo Alto one that came out a couple of days ago as well. So we're not ragging on 40. It's just it's a popular product. It's used by a lot of people, so the impact can be pretty high.
It is, and yeah, I mean, and Palo, it's just as bad. Avanti had a really bad year last year. Was that earlier this year? I can't remember. I haven't seen an Avanti for a little while, but maybe I just became desensitized to it. But look, it's any of this infrastructure. It's really risky having it exposed. That's all the topics we have at the moment. I want to take a little bit of time and discuss what's been happening in the SOC and in DFIR. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach and go through a couple of initiatives. So we are now publishing statistics around our case handling within the SOC and within DFIR, looking at our overall caseload by percentages, broken down by verticals and the most common alerts we're seeing in the SOC, and also down into the number of cases that DFIR are handling, who the threat actors are, and what type of cases they are. So that's something that we've been working to get to a point where we can share, and that is starting to come out in our monthly newsletters as well. So if you're not on that mailing list, reach out to tlblue@triscollabs.com. We can definitely get you added to those mailing lists. Rich, did you have anything to throw into that side of things?
Nothing specific. I think, it's just good kind of outline for readers of that to see this is what we're seeing in real life response. And a lot of the time we're not seeing something that's. People always love to say it was a sophisticated threat actor.
They're not.
A lot of the time it's not. We see the same sort of things over and over again. So getting briefed on that information, understanding it, and knowing how it impacts your organization is a handy thing to know.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the flip side of that, I mentioned we're going to have some guests coming through. So we're looking at bringing a few of the DFIR guys in to co-host when Richard or I are unavailable. To that end, we've also made some changes in the SOC team as well. So we've promoted one of our guys internally up to Victorian SOC lead. So that is an attempt to have more capacity in the SOC. We've just hired additional headcount as well, so we're expanding that team out quite significantly at the moment, with a lot more news to come on that over the next couple of months as well. So really, really exciting times for the Driscoll Labs SOC. And Rich, I know your team's been growing as well.
Yep. Couple of new team members over the next few months, which is always exciting.
It is. So look, again, as I apologise at the top, apologise again for not releasing anything recently to those of you that do enjoy listening, but we will be here a lot more frequently, and the business is putting processes in place to make us more available. So with that said, I've been Brad Morgan, and thank you very much for your time listening to us today.
Thanks for tuning in.